Welcome to this week's edition of Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, the podcast where open source news meets actionable intelligence. Neil Bisson, retired CSIS intelligence officer and director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, brings over 25 years of experience to the mic, decoding espionage, sabotage, cyber warfare, and foreign influence so you can better understand the threats shaping your world. In this week's episode, Russia has granted citizenship to an American who spied on Ukrainian forces, a move that reveals Moscow's long-game recruitment tactics and its use of public spectacle to weaponize loyalty. In Israel, a bold national ad campaign warns citizens about Iranian intelligence recruitment, a rare public move in the shadowy world of counterintelligence. In East Asia, a Japanese man is sentenced in a closed-door espionage trial in China, sparking concerns over Beijing's use of lawfare. Meanwhile, a major breach of the US National Guard by elite Chinese hackers underscores just how far advanced persistent threats are willing to go. Back home in Canada, political controversy erupts as Canada's public safety minister is found to have supported a man tied to the Tamil Tigers, a case that raises serious questions about national security, immigration, and political responsibility. All this as well as Denmark's concern over foreign researchers and a targeted assassination of an intelligence official in Kiev. It's a heavy lineup this week, and one that cuts across continents, ideologies, and alliances. Are you ready? Then let's go.
Hello, and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Each week, I provide you insights and produce the intelligence from news stories from around the globe. If it deals with national security, espionage, sabotage, or terrorism, I look past the headlines and give you the analysis you need to see how it affects your career, your country, and your livelihood. This week, we're covering everything from an assassination of a Ukrainian intelligence official to accusation that Canada's public minister wrote support letters for a suspected terrorist. Time to shed light on the shadow world of intelligence. Let's get started. In this week's first story, we're turning to something that reads straight out of a Cold War thriller. According to Russian-installed authorities in Ukraine's Donetsk region, an American citizen named Daniel Martindale has been granted Russian citizenship by decree of President Vladimir Putin as a reward for spying on Ukrainian troops during Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. The article outlines how Martindale spent over 2 years behind enemy lines feeding intelligence to Moscow's security services before being exfiltrated in a covert operation. Martindale, an American national, reportedly entered Ukraine in early 2022, shortly before Russia launched its full-scale invasion. He allegedly passed along coordinates of Ukrainian military facilities to Russian intelligence, all while posing as a missionary. Russian officials now say his role in supporting their military operations was so critical, he's been rewarded with Russian citizenship. Martindale received his passport during a formal ceremony in Moscow, stating in Russian that, quote, "Russia is not only my home, but my family," unquote. From an intelligence perspective, this is a textbook example of how authoritarian regimes like Russia use public spectacle to bolster their strategic narratives. By lionizing a foreign agent in such a high-profile way, the Kremlin isn't just thanking Martindale, it's sending a message to Western audiences. Your citizens can be turned, and we will celebrate them for it. This isn't the first time that Russia has granted asylum or citizenship to Westerners accused of working against their home countries. This case is reminiscent of Edward Snowden, who was granted residency and later citizenship after leaking classified NSA documents in 2013. But Martindale's case is even more audacious. Reports indicate that he may have been recruited by Russian intelligence as far back as 2016 when he was studying in Russia, and possibly expelled in 2019 for labor violations. If true, this speaks to a long-term cultivation strategy, one where Russia grooms sympathetic Westerners to act as human assets inside hostile territories. Some listeners may remember that back in March I discussed the case of Latkin Pavin, a former Canadian Armed Forces reservist who was recently released from Polish custody on espionage charges after he admitted to being a Russian spy. Pavin had told Polish investigators that he believed he was heading to Donetsk to assist with the humanitarian group. But once on the ground, he was approached by someone believed to be a FSB officer and pressured into cooperating with Russian intelligence. He was instructed by his Russian handlers to travel to Warsaw to gather information on the Polish military. These operations are part of a broader trend of psychological and information warfare. By building a public narrative around Martindale's loyalty, the Kremlin is seeking to demoralize Western publics, encourage others to follow suit, and reinforce its own domestic propaganda machine. Danish Pushlin, head of the Russian-occupied Donetsk region, called Martindale one of us and praised him for supporting our guys and risking his life to deliver intelligence to Moscow. If he had been operating in the strategically important city of Volodar during major battles, his intelligence could have had significant consequences on the battlefield. From my own perspective, this case reveals how Russia is capitalizing on sympathetic foreign nationals, whether disaffected, ideologically aligned, or opportunistic, to extend their intelligence reach. These individuals are low-cost, high-impact assets. And in a war zone, even a single source with real-time information can be a force multiplier. Daniel Martindale's story may be unique in its visibility, but it's far from isolated. This case highlights how modern espionage is evolving, blending traditional human intelligence, or HUMINT, with propaganda, information operations, and public spectacle. The implications are serious. Countries like Canada and its allies must be more alert to citizens who develop strong ties to adversarial regimes, especially under the guise of education, religious work, or humanitarian missions. If Western governments don't take this trend seriously, they risk allowing future Martindales to operate unchecked. Surveillance, counterintelligence strategies, and better screening of foreign academic and travel activity are needed, not just for the sake of security, but to protect the integrity of democratic societies. For our next segment, we stick with the issues of foreign state recruitment, but we turn our attention to a powerful new counterintelligence initiative out of Israel. This week, the Israeli government launched a nationwide advertising campaign urging citizens not to fall prey to Iranian recruitment efforts. The campaign, spearheaded by Shin Bet, Israel's internal security agency, aims to raise public awareness of how Iranian intelligence operatives target vulnerable individuals through social media, emotional manipulation, and financial incentives. The message is clear. If it sounds suspicious, it probably is. The campaign includes videos, online content, and media interviews warning the Israeli public not to engage with unknown contacts online, particularly those who seem too friendly or offer easy money. Shin Bet's moves underscores a growing concern. Iranian intelligence services are stepping up efforts to recruit Israelis to gather information, transport equipment, or conduct surveillance, all under the guise of innocent relationships or business opportunities. This campaign is a direct attempt to inoculate the public against hostile human intelligence collection. Iranian's intelligence agencies, particularly the Ministry of Intelligence and IRGC Quds Force, are known for targeting citizens in Israel, Europe, and North America through various cutouts, fake personas, and coercive tactics. The Israeli government's proactive approach represents a shift from quiet interdiction to public deterrence. This isn't the first time Israeli officials have warned about the Iranian espionage. In recent years, multiple incidents have come to light involving Israelis recruited via Telegram, Facebook, and other social platforms to perform low-level tasks such as photographing sensitive sites or delivering items across borders. While many of these operations may seem innocuous, they serve as building blocks for more serious intelligence gathering efforts. Back in 2022, Shin Bet revealed it foiled a plot in which an Iranian handler posed as a Jewish man living abroad and attempting to lure women into relationships to recruit them for espionage. The public warning echoes the urgency of those earlier disclosures, but brings to a mass audience a coordinated national campaign. While the article doesn't cite specific analysts, the implication is clear. Iran is not letting up, and Israeli counterintelligence agencies are adapting by shifting their approach to emphasize public education. As a retired intelligence officer, I've seen this tactic used effectively in other jurisdictions, including campaigns in the US, the UK, warning academics and scientists about Chinese and Russian recruitment attempts. But what stands out here is how direct and personal the Israeli message is, tailored to each citizen, not just officials or military personnel. This is classic counterintelligence in the modern age. You don't just protect secrets by locking them up, you protect them by making your citizens harder to manipulate. This campaign reflects the new front line of counterintelligence, not just governments and institutions, but the public. As state-sponsored recruitment efforts grow bolder, particularly from Iran, public awareness becomes a critical defense. Israel's advertising blitz is a smart move, signaling to adversaries that their tactics are exposed and their chances of success are dwindling. Canada would do well to take note. While we face different actors and threats, the principles are the same. Hostile intelligence services exploit ignorance, trust, and vulnerability. National security begins with public awareness. In this next segment, we focus on a rising geopolitical tension in East Asia, where a Chinese court has just sentenced a Japanese man to 3.5 years in prison on charges of espionage. The individual, reportedly in his 60s, and an employee of a major pharmaceutical company, Astellas Pharma, was arrested in March 2023 and charged last August under China's expanding anti-espionage laws. This latest case underscores the growing risk faced by foreign nationals conducting business in China and reveals deeper fault lines in the China-Japan relationship. According to Japanese embassy in Beijing, the man was tried behind closed doors and few details were made public. The lack of transparency surrounding the case is a consistent feature of China's state security prosecutions. Japan's ambassador to China, Kenji Katasugi, called the sentence extremely regrettable, emphasizing that this and similar detentions are straining diplomatic ties and eroding trust between the two nations. This case is the latest in a broader pattern. Since 2014, the year China implemented its anti-espionage law, at least 17 Japanese citizens have been detained under suspicion of spying. 5 of them remain in custody. In 2022, a Japanese diplomat was detained for questioning and later released, triggering a diplomatic protest from Tokyo. The message from Beijing appears clear. China is increasingly using anti-espionage legislation to project state power and control foreign influence, especially against countries viewed as strategic rivals. China's anti-spying law has been steadily expanded and enforced with increasing regularity. What began as a national security mechanism to counter foreign intelligence activity has morphed into a tool of deterrence and arguably coercion against business professionals, researchers, and even tourists. For Japan, this trend is particularly concerning given the high volume of economic, academic, and governmental interaction with China. It is also worth noting the broader regional tension. Japan sees China's expanding military presence, economic leverage, and technological ambitions as a strategic threat. In response, Tokyo has increased defense spending, strengthened its alliance with the US and Canada, and has begun discussing more assertive counterintelligence and cyber capabilities. Beijing's use of vague and opaque legal proceedings to detain foreign nationals adds to the anxiety. From an intelligence standpoint, this can have a chilling effect on international cooperation, commercial ventures, and diplomatic engagement. It signals the risk of arbitrary detention, or what some might view as hostage diplomacy, is very real. While the article doesn't cite outside analysts, the implications are evident. China's weaponization of legal frameworks for national security purposes is now an established pattern. Similar incidents have occurred with Canadian, American, Australian, and Taiwanese nationals. Each case follows a template: secret trials, no access to independent counsel, and sentences handed down with little to no public explanation. I find this trend very concerning. It is part of what intelligence professionals call lawfare, the strategic use of legal systems to advance geopolitical objectives. It's not espionage in the classic sense. It's a form of political messaging, and it works because it injects fear and hesitation into diplomatic and commercial engagement with China. The sentencing of this Japanese citizen highlights 3 key dynamics. 1. The expansion of China's counterintelligence apparatus. 2. The deterioration of Japan-China relations. And 3. The growing vulnerability of foreign nationals operating inside authoritarian states. This is not an isolated case. It's part of a wider pattern in which China uses its legal system as an instrument for strategic influence. For Japan, and indeed other democracies, the signal is clear: proceed with caution. Business, academic, and diplomatic activities now carry significant personal risk, particularly in a country where espionage can be whatever the state deems it to be. The potential for Canadian officials to face detention and scrutiny abroad, and given our economic engagements and entanglements with China, it is essential that we strengthen our consular protections, enhance public awareness campaigns for travelers, and continue to monitor how foreign intelligence and security laws are being used as tools of intimidation. We're moved from the Chinese courts to Chinese hackers in this segment, where we examine the chilling new revelation from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. An elite Chinese cyber spy group known as Typhoon penetrated at least one of the U.S. state's Army National Guard network for over 9 months. According to a leaked DHS memo obtained through a Freedom of Information request, the breach began in March 2024 and remained active until last December. The group, already behind a series of major cyber espionage campaigns across the United States, may have accessed highly sensitive military, law enforcement, and critical infrastructure data. The breach, described as, quote, extensive compromise, raises serious concerns about both national and state-level vulnerabilities. National Guard units, while part of the Department of Defense, operate under dual state federal authority, meaning they are deeply integrated into local emergency response systems, cybersecurity teams, and law enforcement partnerships. This makes them a high-value target for hostile intelligence services, not just for military data, but for access into civilian infrastructure and fusion centers. Assault Typhoon is believed to have extracted maps of geographic locations tied to National Guard operations, internal network diagrams, and personal data of military service members. From an intelligence perspective, this kind of access creates a launch pad for broader surveillance, exploitation, and follow-on cyber attacks. With 14 National Guard units in the US maintaining direct links to law enforcement fusion centers, the breach could have cascading effects across both state and federal systems. Assault Typhoon is no newcomer to the global cyber battlefield. This group, widely believed to operate on behalf of China's Ministry of State Security, or MSS, is infamous for its ability to pivot laterally across networks, embedding itself in telecommunication firms, critical infrastructure, and now state military systems. Last year, Assault Typhoon reportedly compromised 8 of the US's largest telecom and internet providers, including AT&T and Verizon, using that access to monitor communications linked to the Harris and Trump campaigns, and even the office of then State Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. They are persistent, well-resourced, and patient, with Cisco confirming the group remained undetected in one environment for up to 3 years. What's particularly troubling about this breach is its hybrid nature. While it began in a military domain, the National Guard's dual responsibility model means this attack may have compromised law enforcement, emergency services, and even local government networks. While no specific analysts were quoted in the article, the implications are obvious to anyone with intelligence or cybersecurity experience. From a counterintelligence lens, this operation fits China's growing strategy of targeting edge network institutions, where oversight is lighter, defenses are weaker, and integration with other sectors creates ripple effects. The spokesman for the National Guard Bureau confirmed the attack but declined to provide details. The Chinese embassy, for its part, did not deny the campaign, simply stating that cyber attacks are a global problem and that the US has not provided conclusive evidence. Let me be clear, this is standard Chinese deniability doctrine. They've used this line before. From the theft of Office of Personnel Management files, a U.S. federal agency responsible for managing the civilian civil workforce in 2015, to repeated attempts against Canada's federal networks, Beijing's preferred tactic is to cast out, deny involvement, and continue operations in the shadows. The Assault Typhoon breach highlights a critical weakness in federal security systems, when national security assets operate at the state or provincial level without full-spectrum cyber defense. For Canada, this has direct implications. Our provincial emergency management systems, municipal police services, and even certain reserve forces may similarly lack the robust cyber posture needed to detect and repel advanced persistent threats. This is no longer about a few stolen files or disrupted systems. This long-term digital infiltration with strategic objectives, mapping infrastructure, identifying key personnel, and establishing backdoors into systems that matter when crisis hit, also reinforces the importance of cross-jurisdictional coordination. When state-level agencies are compromised, national intelligence suffers. The U.S., like Canada, must invest in strengthening cyber protocols across all levels of government, especially where civilian and military systems intersect. This is what modern espionage looks like. Not a man in a trench coat handing off documents, but a hacker in a t-shirt halfway across the world, quietly copying network architecture files from a laptop. In this segment, we turn to controversy unfolding within Canada's federal government, one that raises difficult questions about immigration, terrorism designations, and the responsibility of elected officials. Canada's current Public Safety Minister, Gary Anadasangri, is under scrutiny after it was revealed that prior to his cabinet appointment, he wrote letters in support of a man found by the Canada Border Service Agency to have been a member of the Tamil Tigers, a group listed as a terrorist entity in Canada. According to the newly revealed federal court documents, Minister Anasangri, then a member of parliament, submitted letters on his official letterhead in 2016 and again in 2023 urging the CBSA to consider its decision to deny permanent residency to a Sri Lankan man named Senthuran Selvakumaran. The rationale in these letters emphasized humanitarian grounds, particularly family separation. However, CBSA determined that Selvakumaran was inadmissible to Canada under national security grounds due to his past membership in the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or the LTTE. While his activities reportedly involved the distribution of LTTE propaganda rather than direct acts of violence, Canadian law treats any support for listed terrorist groups, including non-violent activities, as grounds for inadmissibility. The man's appeal to the federal court was dismissed just days ago, upholding CBSA's assessment that his involvement in the LTTE constituted support for terrorism. The LTTE is designated as a terrorist organization in Canada following decades of insurgent warfare and high-profile attacks, including suicide bombings and political assassinations. While the civil war in Sri Lanka ended in 2009, members and supporters of the LTTE continue to face scrutiny in countries where the group remains banned. This case also highlights the political tightrope elected officials often walk when it comes to constituency advocacy. It is common for members of parliament to submit letters supporting immigration applicants from within their ridings. However, when such support involves individuals linked to terrorism, even tangentially, it introduces a new level of risk, both in perception and in policy integrity. Security screening of individuals with ties to criminality, terrorism, or foreign governments actively working against Canada's interests only works if the recommendations by the government agencies like CSIS and CBSA are adhered to. Politicians trying to score points with constituents by recommending that these decisions be overturned are risking Canada's national security. Terrorist organizations, foreign governments, and criminal organizations are well aware of the loopholes and pressure points that they can use to manipulate Canada's immigration and political systems to gain access to Canada, becoming citizens and then infiltrating our political systems to work contrary to Canada's interests and endanger our national security. In this instance, the individual receiving support from the Public Safety Minister was ultimately found to have engaged in activities that directly contributed to the LTTE's operations, a fact that under the Canadian law overrides humanitarian considerations in many cases involving security assessments. While no expert quotes were included in the report, from a national security standpoint, the situation reveals two critical vulnerabilities. The first, the potential for politicized interference in immigration and inadmissibility processes, and the second, reputational risk when elected officials support individuals tied to terrorist groups, even in a personal or non-violent capacity. This controversy also presents a dilemma for public safety leadership. Since taking office, the Public Safety Minister has placed a recusal screen on LTTE-related matters, acknowledging that his past involvement in Tamil advocacy could create conflicts of interest. But the fact remains, the individual now overseeing Canada's counterterrorism portfolio previously advocated for a man found to have supported a terrorist organization. This case serves as a reminder that national security doesn't exist in a vacuum. It intersects with politics, immigration, public perception, and diplomacy. Ministers, MPs, and all public officials must be cautious in the support they lend, particularly when it involves individuals plagued by Canada's own national security apparatus. More broadly, the incident underscores the need for strong boundaries between political advocacy and operational security assessment. It also reaffirms the importance of robust, independent review mechanisms when cases involve terrorism allegations. As the story continues to unfold, it remains to be seen what impact, if any, this will have on the Public Safety Minister's credibility or the public's trust in Canada's security institutions. We head to Denmark for our next story, where we examine a growing trend that could have serious implications for Canada. I'm talking about a recent article discussing several leading Danish institutions that are now turning away applicants from countries like China, Russia, and Iran due to concerns about state-sponsored espionage. Aarhus University alone has rejected at least 24 foreign researchers this year, a move driven by national security concerns and increasing awareness of risks tied to sensitive dual-use research. At the core of the article is the assertion by Danish security officials that the espionage threat to universities is both real and high. Foreign researchers, particularly from adversarial nations, are seen as potential conduits for illicit technology transfer or influence operations. Danish universities are now proactively screening applicants, particularly those who would gain access to research in areas such as quantum technology or green energy transition, sectors that hold both economic and military value. From an intelligence perspective, this is a smart and necessary defensive posture. Academic institutions are frequent targets of foreign intelligence services. Research generated in universities can be of strategic value to adversaries, especially when applied to dual-use technologies that straddle civilian and military domains. If such research is accessed, copied, or exfiltrated, it could ultimately undermine a nation's innovative edge and compromise its national defense posture. Denmark's response is not occurring in a vacuum. The country has recently assumed the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union and has made defense and cybersecurity key priorities. In parallel, the Danish Emergency Management Agency has identified cyber espionage and cybercrime against university as, quote, very high, unquote, threats. These policy shifts reflect a broader European trend, where academic security is increasingly being seen through the lens of national security. In contrast, Canada continues to lag behind. Although CSIS has issued public warnings for years about the exploitation of Canadian research by foreign actors, particularly China, there is no formal national protocol for academic security screening. Universities remain largely autonomous and are under no legal obligation to heed intelligence briefings. Brian Vintner, the Vice Dean of Aarhus University's Faculty of Engineering, stated that several applicants were denied because they would have had access to research material that could be shared with third parties. Meanwhile, Andre Ken Jacobsen, Associate Professor of Denmark's Center for War Studies, warned that the increasing global demand for advanced technology is making the espionage threat even more intense. These assessments align with my own professional perspective on the issue. The intelligence community has long known that states like China, Iran, and Russia deploy covert strategies to gain access to foreign research. That includes placing students or researchers in targeted programs, a soft but effective method of acquiring valuable intellectual property without firing a shot. Denmark is demonstrating that vigilance in academia is not paranoia, it's strategy. Their preemptive screening of researchers may come at a cost of rejecting some legitimate applicants, but the greater cost would be losing control over sensitive research to foreign adversaries. Canada must start asking itself some hard questions. 1. Are we doing enough to safeguard our academic institutions? 2. Are Canadian universities aware of the espionage threat they face? And 3. Do we need national-level security protocols to keep pace with our allies? If we fail to act, the very research that drives our future could be used against us. For our last segment this week, we focus on a chilling development in Ukraine that blurs the line between ideological extremism and state-sponsored violence. A Telegram post attributed to the Ukrainian wing of the Base, a far-right terrorist group originally founded in the United States, has claimed responsibility for the recent assassination of Colonel Ivan Voronik, a senior officer with Ukraine's security service, or SBU. The killing took place in broad daylight in a Kiev parking lot, and the video of the assassination has quickly spread through Ukrainian media, shocking the public and raising new questions about the nature of hybrid warfare in Eastern Europe. The assassination marks a dangerous escalation in the base's activities. For months, the group has publicly called for sabotage and assassination within Ukraine, offering monetary rewards for attacks on critical infrastructure and political targets. With this killing, the base appears to have moved beyond propaganda into direct action, either by coordinating the attack, endorsing it after the fact, or both. The statement posed by the group claimed the murder was, quote, only the beginning, unquote, and declared its members would continue their campaign until justice prevails. The same message lauded the attackers as heroes and dismissed critics who labeled them terrorists or extremists. A follow-up post threatened further attacks on Ukrainian public figures, declaring, quote, the hunt continues. This isn't just violent rhetoric, it's part of a broader campaign. Since at least March, the group has claimed responsibility for arson attacks targeting military vehicles, electrical infrastructure, and police stations across Ukraine. These attacks, geolocated and documented in online videos, suggest a coordinated insurgency campaign aimed at destabilizing Ukraine from within. The base was formed in 2018 by Ronaldo Nazaro, a former Pentagon contractor who has since relocated to St. Petersburg, Russia. The group quickly attracted attention from the FBI and other Western intelligence services for the extremist ideology and attempts to build an all-white ethno-state through terrorism. It has been designated a terrorist organization by several governments. Originally focused on the US and North America, the base has increasingly shifted its operations abroad, especially in Europe. In April, the group declared the start of an insurgency in western Ukraine, claiming it sought to establish the white ethno-state in the Zakarpattia region. The group's ideological messaging has become intertwined with broader geopolitical aims and increasingly aligned with Russian interests. According to Ukrainian security services, the two suspects behind Voronik's assassination were killed shortly after the attack. Ukrainian officials believe that they were recruited and supplied by Russian intelligence. Reports suggest the attackers were foreign nationals linked to criminal groups, supported remotely by Russian handlers. If true, this suggests that the base, or at least elements of it, may now be operating as a proxy or tool of Russian statecraft. Although Nazaro has denied direct involvement in the Ukraine cell or the assassination, he has publicly praised the group's actions in Ukraine and claimed to have relinquished control to local members. He has also repeatedly denied any relationship with Russian intelligence, despite evidence suggesting that the group's digital infrastructure relies heavily on Russian platforms, including email services linked to Kremlin allies. Analysts monitoring extremist movements believe the group's recent actions in Ukraine represent a significant evolution. According to one counterterrorism expert, the base has conducted at least 10 attacks inside Ukraine and has issued repeated threats to carry out assassinations and acts of sabotage. While it's difficult to confirm the group's direct responsibility for the Voronik killing, the operation is consistent with their stated goals and operational tactics. This kind of activity presents a double threat. Ideologically driven terrorism merged with state-sponsored objectives. The group is no longer acting independently. It's becoming part of a new gray zone conflict. where traditional intelligence services enable and exploit non-state actors to wage war without attribution. The assassination of Colonel Ivan Voronich is yet another reminder that the modern threat environment is rapidly evolving. Groups like the base are no longer fringe movements operating in isolation. They are becoming hybrid threats, ideologically radical, operationally violent, and strategically useful to hostile state actors like Russia. Ukraine is facing these threats head-on. But for other countries like Canada, the implications are just as serious. Are we prepared for a world where foreign intelligence services co-opt domestic or foreign extremist groups to conduct targeted assassination, sabotage, and influence operations? Are we tracking the online spacing where these groups coordinate and radicalize? And more importantly, are we prepared to respond when these threats cross our borders? As always, these are questions we need to ask, because in intelligence, what we fail to see is often our biggest threat, and what we ignore often hurts us the most. That's going to do it for this week, looking into the shadowy world of intelligence. As always, the links to the open source stories are in the transcript for you to read and make your own assessments. This podcast is not about hype or spin or political leanings. It's about taking information and through a process of collaboration, verification, and analysis, providing you with actionable, relatable intelligence. And that intelligence tells you to stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe. See you next week.
That wraps up this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. From foreign agents rewarded with Russian passports, to cyber intrusions targeting military infrastructure, to extremist groups turning ideology into assassination, this week's stories show just how broad, complex, and interconnected today's intelligence threats have become. Each episode takes hours of research, analysis, writing, and editing, not to mention decades of real-world experience. This isn't politically slanted slop or clickbait. It's curated intelligence, designed to give you the insight needed to see the bigger picture and be aware and prepared for what's happening. If this episode helped you think differently about the threats we face, please like, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us grow and reach others who care about national security, foreign interference, and protecting democratic institutions. And if you believe in the value of what we're doing, if you want to help keep this podcast sharp, focused, and fully independent, you can support the mission directly through Buzzsprout or Patreon. Every contribution helps ensure we can continue delivering intelligence that matters. Thanks for listening. And as Neil always says, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.